Former Secret Services head Mo Shaik says former President Jacob Zuma should explain his relationship with the Gupta family to the country. He says Zuma failed in his constitutional obligations by misdirecting the intelligence service on the Gupta probe. Shaik is testifying at the State Capture Commission for a second day.
Shaik, once a close ally of Zuma, says his relationship with the then president broke down after he blocked the investigation into the Guptas. He says Zuma's loyalty to the friendship clouded his judgment and that he couldn't separate his personal relations with the Gupta brothers from his responsibilities as the head of state. Shaik also revealed that the former Minister of State Security, Siyabonga Cwele, offered him the position of ambassador to Japan shortly before he left the service.
I was pushed out, but there's a wonderful saying. I think Minister Cwele thought he could bury me. He just didn't understand that I'm a seed. I grow. I don't, So I grew, and I grew out of that situation. I found an elegant exit. And yeah, I'm better off in the position that I am today than I was then.
Well, for more on this story, I'm joined by my colleague Mangoba Mkunu, who has been covering this particular story for us. Thanks very much, Mangoba, for joining us. Very interesting things that have come out today from Mr. Mo Shaik. One of them being, as we read, that he says that the former president wasn't able to distinguish between his responsibility as the head of state and his loyalty and friendship to the Guptas.
Really damning evidence, Nompu, coming out from Mo Shaik, of course, who was a close ally of former President Jacob Zuma. You know that they go back a long way. In fact, he was his advisor at some point. And he says that, during this time and when they took the decision to investigate the Gupta family, he says that the president's relationship with the Gupta brothers, his loyalty to the Gupta brothers, is what actually clouded his judgment for him to actually call off that investigation. And he believes, of course, that this was also a misdirection of the intelligence by the former president. And he says that it was very unfortunate that the president had made that decision, but he says that, he couldn't separate his relationship, his personal relationship with the Gupta brothers, as well as his responsibilities as a head of state. Let's take a listen.
There came a point in his administration where he could not separate, even in his state of mind, the personal relationship with the Guptas from his responsibility as the head of the national executive with certain constitutional obligations and requirements. All things started to be seen through the same prism and created enormous complications.
So, Mangoba, it does seem as though the relationship not only between Mr. Mo Shaik and his direct boss, that is Siyabonga Cwele, but his relationship with the president sort of went further down south when they started offering him jobs as an ambassador because he was probably asking too many questions.
Well, he says, of course, that the relationship between him and Minister Cwele broke down irretrievably. In fact, he says this was immediately after, he had asked for that probe into the Gupta family. And he says, of course, the relationship between him and the president as well also broke down because of that fact. So he says that ultimately he was offered a position of being ambassador to Japan by Minister Cwele, which he says he found very strange, because at the time Ambassador Cwele was the Minister of State Security and he had no right or no obligation legally or constitutionally to offer him that job. But he says, of course, that he believes that this was one of the ways of trying to get him out of intelligence, and that he simply was pushed out of that department. Let's take a listen.
If I look at all the possible significant causes, I would have to conclude that being party to the decision to investigate the Guptas was the significant cause. Everything that resulted from that moment was as a consequence of that, because I think the trust levels were invariably broken around that level.
So the question was put to Mr. Shaik around the supposed appointment of Nhlanhla Nene to the new development bank. What did he have to say about that?
Well, it was interesting, his response, because he says he was using his cap there, Nompu, as a banker himself, a very experienced banker. You know that, of course, he had also worked for the Developmental Bank of South Africa himself. So he says as a banker, there was simply no way that there could be truth to this, because he says a bank would, use its own processes internally to appoint the head of the bank, and not the other way around, that you'll find a person who is sort of like one of the shareholders actually, saying that use this person. So he says that he found it very strange, and he's alluding to the fact that this whole claim by the former president that Nhlanhla was going to head the BRICS Bank is simply not true. Let's take a listen though, Nompu, to what he had to say.
It didn't make sense to me at all that could firstly happen, but secondly, it didn't make sense to me that Minister Nene would accept that, because he served as as a governor
on a higher position.
On the higher position, and now he was going to be taking a considerably lower position, and that wouldn't have made sense to me if I was in that position. And I didn't see how Minister Nene would have taken up that position in any event.
So, Mangoba, he's concluded his testimony for now. What next?
Well, we do expect another witness to come on the stand, and this is the man who was with him, one of the 3 top senior officials within intelligence that actually recommended a probe into the Gupta family, and that is Gibson Njenje, who was, of course, the head of the local domestic operations of intelligence. Yes. So he's next, and he'll corroborate more of some of the evidence that we've heard from Mo Shaik, and more importantly, on how he himself was offered a job as ambassador.
Very juicy stuff. Thanks very much, Mangoba, for your time. President Cyril Ramaphosa says that Eskom will not be privatized.